much harder than on land, where you can slurp a gel packet or chew a protein bar without swallowing lots of salt water. And salt water itself can be really harmful to the body when you're exposed over long periods of time. In particular, it causes abrasions to the soft tissues of the mouth and throat. Endurance swimmers crossing the English Channel have reported mouth and throat soreness lasting for days or weeks after their marathon swims, sometimes even inhibiting their ability to chew and swallow food. Over the course of 157 days, Ross Edgley swam 12 hours a day to circumnavigate Great Britain, covering 2,882 kilometers or 1,791 miles. The extended amount of time in salt water resulted in parts of his tongue rotting off, small wounds turning into sea ulcers that wouldn't heal, and a raw neck wound. And then there's the temperature of the water. The required temperature range for the marathon swimming competition in the Olympics is between 16 and 31 degrees Celsius, extremely chilly on the cold end. But if you're swimming the English Channel, the water temperature can get down to 10 degrees Celsius. While the Catalina Channel isn't quite as cold, it too is below the temperature range required for the Olympics, with lows around 14 degrees Celsius. And for both of these distance races, swimmers are required to not use wetsuits in order for their swim to be officially counted. That means your body has to get acclimated to cold water. One example of this is a man with endurance swimming experience who swam on Lake Constance in Germany in April, when the water temperature was 9.9 degrees Celsius. Researchers used this equation to estimate how long it would have taken for this water temperature to cause fatal hypothermia. They concluded that he would die after 2 hours and 55 minutes in the water. Instead, the man managed to swim 15 kilometers over the course of 6 hours. He was equipped with multiple thermometers reading his body temperature throughout the swim, and while the temperature reading on his calf went all the way down to 11.1 degrees Celsius, his core temperature started at 37.8 degrees Celsius and only decreased to 36.3 degrees Celsius at the end. He never even entered hypothermia. Researchers think this is due to a combination of factors. He had trained in cold water to acclimate his body, and he also had 34.9% body fat, with a BMI of 35.7, which would technically place him in the category of obese. Just goes to show that BMI is a fairly useless measure of health. But hypothermia is a real concern that has occurred in plenty of open water swimmers and has to be carefully monitored. Sometimes it can cause ventricular fibrillation and cardiac failure, even when the swimmer has been removed from the water. And hypothermia-induced cardiac arrest isn't the only risk to the heart. The other potential danger is atrial fibrillation, an arrhythmia that can lead to strokes. This might sound counterintuitive. Doesn't exercise improve your heart health? Yes, usually it does, but extreme endurance athletes are putting far more strain on their hearts than your average 5K runner. During exercise, the heart circulates about 8 times more blood than it does at rest. When athletes continue to train over long periods and at long distances, the actual muscle of the heart gets reshaped, and not always for the better. Researchers still don't know what exactly triggers atrial fibrillation in endurance athletes. What we do know based on studies of athletes with this condition is that when the heart rate remains high, the upper chambers of the heart, called the atria, get stretched out from receiving such a high input of blood from the circulatory system. The right ventricle, meanwhile, is pumping blood back into the body, and it can become fatigued from the amount of work it's doing. This combination of stretched atria and fatigued ventricles can lead to cardiac fibrosis or muscle scarring. This new thickening of the heart muscle, combined with the changed shape of the heart, can lead to the development of the atrial fibrillation arrhythmia. And that arrhythmia can cause strokes, heart attacks, and death, though this happens relatively infrequently. Unfortunately, the heart isn't the only organ at risk when it comes to long-distance open water swimming. The lungs are even more likely to suffer the consequences of this endeavor. One particularly nasty effect on the lungs can be swimming-induced pulmonary edema, which is when fluid accumulates in the lungs, but not because the swimmer is accidentally inhaling water. It happens because immersion in water creates external pressure on the body, and blood is forced away from the extremities into the chest. This is a good thing over short distances and short periods of time, because it keeps the heart and lungs well oxygenated. But the longer swimmers are in the water, the more they run the risk of this type of pulmonary edema. That's because the increased pressure on the pulmonary capillaries can lead to fluid leaking from those capillaries into the air spaces in the lungs. The end result is shortness of breath and a cough tinged with blood. It's unclear how often this happens, even though it's been reported in multiple long-distance events. And while researchers think it generally isn't fatal, it's also hard to know for sure. Swimming also has the possibility of causing severe shortness of breath, and not just because you're working really hard. The muscles used to inhale have to work against the pressure of the water around the thorax, so swimming causes not only locomotor muscle fatigue, but also inspiratory muscle fatigue. And beyond all of this, there's one more extremely weird, counterintuitive risk of long-distance swimming. It often causes an inflammatory response in the body, similar to what you might see from a bacterial infection. This is seen in Ironman athletes in particular, where their bodies show signs of low-grade systemic inflammation that persists for at least 5 days after their race. Even swimming less than 10 kilometers can cause this type of inflammation. One swimmer, for example, completed a non-stop 120-kilometer swim on the Warta River in Poland and showed an increase in leukocytes after the swim. These are the white blood cells that help the body monitor for infection, and they tend to increase when they find one. The swimmer looked like they had an illness. It's not completely understood why this happens, but it seems partly related to the fact that exercise causes small amounts of damage to the muscles. The body can recover from this, clearly, it's how we get stronger. But causing too much damage for the body to keep up with instead triggers an inflammatory response. So long-distance swimming is hard and kind of weird. And making it even weirder is the fact that women can somehow get around all this hardship to sometimes beat even the best men. Despite competing in the Seine's poop water, the 10K endurance swimmers at the Olympics pulled off remarkable times. The gold-winning time for men was 1 hour, 50 minutes, and 52 seconds. And for women, it was 2 hours and 3 minutes and 34 seconds. About 10% slower. This is a pattern we see in many sports. The fastest women are usually about 10% slower than the fastest men. But as the distances increase in many sports, this gap starts to close. And for the ultra distances, the longest and most grueling races, it is often women who outperform men. And this seems to be particularly true in long-distance endurance swimming. So before I get into how women sometimes have a slight advantage, let me explain how anyone is able to do these types of races at all. Humans have some impressive adaptations to survive in the water. All of us benefit from the mammalian dive reflex, which occurs automatically when we hold our breath underwater, a slowed heart rate and reduced blood flow to the extremities so that our organs can stay better oxygenated. But endurance swimming is another beast entirely. In any endurance sport, there are 5 physiological factors that play a big role in determining your ability. The first is heart size. The bigger and stronger the heart, the more easily blood can circulate. The next is lean muscle mass, which is simply the amount of muscle in your body composition. And the next is VO2 max, the body's ability to deliver oxygen to the muscles. To measure this, athletes are normally on a treadmill or stationary bike, wearing a heart rate monitor and a mask. The mask measures the volume of oxygen inhaled and the amount of CO2 exhaled. Higher VO2 max usually means better physical fitness. The next metric needed for endurance sports is called central motor drive. This one is kind of confusing, but it has to do with fatigue and the rate at which the nervous system sends signals to the muscles. Endurance athletes have the ability to recruit more muscles for longer and perceive less fatigue. And the final factor that determines endurance performance is movement economy, or more simply, efficiency. This is the athlete's form, and good form can reduce the effort expended. When these 5 things come together, an endurance athlete is born. For the first three factors, men have a clear natural advantage. Their hearts, lungs, and muscles are just bigger. But the final two factors men don't have an inherent advantage in. Central motor drive and efficiency can be improved with training. And by perfecting and capitalizing on these factors, women can begin to close the gap in athletic performance. And for swimming, efficiency is especially important. It's determined by stroke rate and length, as well as drag from the water. For those doing long-distance open water swims, it's best to kick the legs as little as possible and use them mainly for stabilizing the body and improving what the arms can do. Stroke technique, it's so important that researchers have found that a 10% increase in technique resulted in greater performance improvements than a similar increase in maximal aerobic or anaerobic power. Better efficiency can even make up for differences in VO2 max. Researchers found that athletes with lower VO2 max scores can perform at the same speed and intensity of those with naturally high VO2 max by developing better form. And of any sport, long-distance swimming might be the one where form is the most important. Small inefficiencies in form add up over thousands of strokes over many miles. Women also have more fatigue-resistant fibers in their muscles, which are used during sustained low-intensity exercise, while men have faster contracting fibers, which are better for short bursts of power. And those bigger, faster contracting muscles start to become a problem in multi-hour races. The bigger the muscles, the harder the heart has to work to supply enough blood to them. And even though men usually do have a higher total VO2 max, women can still sometimes gain an advantage here. As the name suggests, VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen a body can consume and use as energy, and maximums are hard to maintain. Some studies have shown that it's better to be able to maintain a consistent VO2 during an endurance event rather than getting to the absolute limit of the VO2 max. The problem with maintaining this high-level aerobic activity is that you eventually reach the lactate threshold. It's when you get to a level of effort where your fatigue sharply increases and tends to happen when you're close to your maximum heart rate or about 75% of your VO2 max. Whenever your blood lactate level suddenly increases, that marks your lactate threshold. Endurance athletes have a higher lactate threshold than your regular couch potato, but like VO2 max, this is something that can improve with training. A small study of 8 open water swimmers found that while the men had comparable levels of lactate threshold as other endurance athletes, female swimmers were able to reach a higher pace before hitting their lactate threshold than land-based athletes. And there's one more way in which long-distance swimming is a bit different to other endurance sports, which I hinted at earlier. Men swimmers tend to range from 6 to 19% body fat, and women swimmers between 18 and 23%, which is a higher body fat percentage than long-distance runners or cyclists usually have. Because in swimming, it actually helps to be a little thicker. And this comes back to swimming efficiency. Being more buoyant helps you spend less energy. One woman who swam the Catalina Channel in 9 hours and 2 minutes, a time that ranked her in the top 10% of all swimmers, had 25% body fat. And remember how unbearably cold the water usually is. More body fat certainly helps with that in a big way. On top of this, women's bodies are often smaller than men's, creating less drag. At any given speed, women tend to have a lower energy cost of swimming than men do. With all of these factors combined, women are often as fast or sometimes faster than men in long-distance swimming. Women hold the top 2 records in the Catalina Channel swim. The Manhattan Island swim record is held by a man, but who only narrowly beat the woman record holder by 45 seconds that same day. And women still hold many of the top spots. And although men make up 7 of the top 10 in terms of speed for the Triple Crown, women hold 3 of the top 6 places. Leaderboards simply don't look like this for basically any other sport. Only in ultramarathon running and technical climbing do women similarly come close to being able to compete for top spots. But man or woman, very few people in the world are capable of these types of multi-hour swims. Anyone that can compete at all is incredible. And even if being a woman might give me some marginal benefit, I would still probably die. Sure, the human body can achieve great things, but mine sure can't. The genetic lottery gave me things like a 12-minute mile and coordination so bad it veers on dangerous. So my motto's always been, if you're bad at sports, you might as well be good at math. And to get better at math and science and computer science, I use Brilliant.org. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. And Brilliant for me works better than any other learning tool, better than textbooks or even college lectures, because it takes you step by step through the learning process, helping you build understanding from the ground up. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that sometimes feel more like games than learning. This interactivity is proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. And Brilliant isn't a memorization tool, it's the opposite. Brilliant helps build your critical thinking skills through problem solving, not memorizing equations. The scientific thinking course has been especially fun to engage with this summer while watching the Olympics. Every day, my jaw drops when some athlete does something that seems to defy the laws of gravity and motion, especially the gymnasts. But of course, defying physics isn't possible, and the scientific thinking course helps break down what these athletes and their coaches seem to understand that we don't. The lessons on balance help me wrap my head around the internal calculations the gymnasts must be.
Here is Africa's desert. 100 days ago, it was a graveyard. But with time, it transformed into one of the most resilient yet ruthless ecosystems on our planet. But where there is life, there is always death. Can life find balance in 100 days, or is it all doomed to die? Well, we'll have to go back to day 1, with the empty tank, some supplies, and a whole lot of cacti. And after building up a deep layer of substrate, I placed in some rock and finally began to plant. But the trees here are covered in razor-sharp spines and a poisonous sap. Those are not coming out. One infection later, and the tank was complete. This is going to be the foundation for a thriving ecosystem, starting with darkling beetles, who have the most extraordinary superpower. During the day, they would seek shelter to hide from the desert heat. Not all of them would make it. Those that found safety underground waited until nightfall to re-emerge. They began to group up for a monumental moment. Even the beetle I thought was dead joined the gathering. It was as if they were frozen in time. They were about to reveal their superpower. They hold their ground and angle their backs high into the air. Suddenly, tiny water droplets begin to form. They're turning the wind into water, and as it drips down their back, they finally get to drink. It looks like they have escaped death, for now. By day 4, the beetles were not the only life in the tank. Underground, an empire is born. This queen harvester ant is raising her first batch of young. Her larvae needed food, and I had to introduce some. Here are 50 dermestid beetles, and they are at the bottom of the food chain. They eat decaying matter and even bone marrow, so this coyote skull should feed them for many days to come. By day 35, the beetle population began to boom. These are not tiny worms, but beetle larvae. I placed in a dead fish to draw them out of the ground, and they immediately began to swarm. Pretty soon, there was nothing left but a pile of bones. Their population was getting out of hand, and I needed to introduce a predator. Meet the dune gecko and his entire family. But immediately, this one came head to head with a darkling beetle. He had never seen one before. Out of fear, he begins to wave his tail to alert the others. After only a few seconds, he musters up enough courage to carry on. Meanwhile, his brother was working on something monumental. He began to dig out the coyote skull, and over the next 5 days, he transformed the skeleton into a sanctuary. And if we look underground, they have made it their home. This one was even shedding his skin. He could only do this here, in the safety of the burrow. In parallel, on the other end of the tank, the Queen's first workers had emerged. They needed food, so they made their way to the surface where the hunt would begin. This beetle is the perfect meal, and they must work as a team. They are rushing to get it back to the nest, and with good reason. The sky was beginning to darken, and the temperature had dropped. I was about to simulate a sandstorm. The storm had coated the tank in a thin red sand, but in the ravine, it uncovered something remarkable. Dormant fish eggs. All they needed was a little water. By day 45, the beetles were still overpopulated. I needed to introduce a new predator. He is the most dangerous animal so far, and everything began to hide. But this gecko is far too late. He is being hunted. His only chance of survival is to make a run back to his burrow. But who would make the first move? Safe and sound. In the coming days, everything was about to change forever, and you would not believe what would happen. I'm using Opera, my favorite internet browser, along with my mom, dad, brother, and even Lizard. Hey, you shouldn't be watching that. Well, actually, Opera allows you to have private browsing and hide your location with a VPN built into the browser completely for free. Nice. And what I really love is their built-in AI called Aria. Let's see if it can name the next animal. A camel spider. I did not expect it to know that. And it can even explain some of these words for me. Now, if you really want to get crazy, it can make custom images. How about one of my chameleon making tacos? Oh, Bernie, you wish you could do that. But that is only the beginning. Opera can block all ads in one click. You can have music on hand in the sidebar, mark important tabs with emojis, and best of all, it's free. All you have to do is use the link in my description to download Opera for free today. Good stuff, huh? By day 60, the dry season was at its peak. Many of the leaves had turned yellow, and even the cacti were beginning to fade. There was only one animal unaffected by the drought. The ant colony, and they had tripled in size. By storing seeds underground, they can wait out the dry season, and they would need to stay there for what is about to happen next. As clouds rolled over the tank, I was about to simulate a monsoon. The tank began to flood. And as the water level rose, life had to seek higher ground. storm faded away, animals came running to the river for a drink. They had to be cautious, and for good reason. They were not alone. Turns out he was not looking for a meal, but a drink. He was completely unaware of what was happening underwater. The dormant fish eggs were waking up and finally beginning to hatch. The fish are no bigger than a grain of sand and swim alongside hundreds of baby shrimp. By day 69, the rain had triggered breeding season. And underground, the geckos laid their first clutch of eggs. But there is one animal still looking for a mate, and for him, we must wait until nightfall. That chirping sound is him calling for a mate. But no one answered, and he was all alone. Until now, they cautiously approach one another. If she likes him, they will breed. If she doesn't, she will eat him. Or maybe both. Their fate now lies in the dark. He didn't make it through the night. But his sacrifice was not in vain. The female found a soft patch of ground where she began to lay. It looks like he'd passed on his genes to a new generation. Now his body would not be wasted as the ants began to swarm. And underground, they were forming an empire. Their population was completely unchecked, and I needed to introduce an ant predator. Meet the antlion. And here are 4 more. They may be small in size, but they have big plans. Each one begins by digging out a pit in the ground. They are constructing a field of traps. One wrong move and the ant is doomed. He tries to escape, but the antlion launches sand back. He is finally safe. Or not. There is no way out now. This beetle climbs over as if nothing ever happened. Meanwhile, the river was teeming with life. Dozens of fairy shrimp were reaching adulthood. This one became a meal for the killifish. He will soon be ready to breed. On day 90, a mother's life had come to an end. Her eggs were safe underground, and her life cycle was complete. But now there was no animal to control the beetles. I needed to introduce one final predator. Meet the camel spider. He has the mouth of a crab, the body of a spider, and the charm of my mother-in-law. Time to add him in. And he immediately went on the hunt. By day 99, life was in perfect harmony. Yet the animals were outgrowing their desert home. I decided to move them all out and end the simulation once and for all. This may be the end of this story, but it marks the beginning to so many more.
When people think about robots, they usually imagine something like a Boston Dynamics robot, metallic and humanoid. But the robots we'll see in the future might not look like that at all. I mean, if humans are interacting with something on a daily basis, it's probably best not to make it sharp, delicate, and heavy.
How rude!
Instead, advanced robots might be made safer if they're soft, flexible, and all kinds of shapes and sizes. So instead of Sunny from iRobot,
No.
something like Baymax from Big Hero 6 might be closer to what's in our future. This is a compilation video of 5 of my videos on the surprisingly different ways robots can look and why we build them that way. This is my first time trying out a series, and honestly, it's been a busy time for the Veritasium team. We're working on some exciting things in the background, but in the meantime, we wanted to put this together for all.
You may have heard of the Mayan civilization in your history class, observed their ruins when you visited Mexico, or seen their portrayals in the Mel Gibson movie Apocalypto. You may also know them as the people who predicted our world's demise, a date that's constantly been shifted by conspiracy theorists every time the collapse of the Earth fails to materialize. But given our current multiple existential crises, it is likely one day those predicting the end of the world will be right. Broken clocks and all that. Anyway, over 1,000 years ago, the mighty Mayan civilization, one of the most impressive empires of the Western Hemisphere, just disappeared. How did the Mayans predict the end of the world, but fail to divine their own collapse? And how did their civilization fall apart anyway? We sent a very reluctant and panicked research team back in time to the moment just before the Mayan Empire fell, to find out what happened. The first signs of the Mayan civilization appeared in 1500 BC. In modern-day Guatemala, southern Mexico, and parts of Belize, small villages started to form, organized around the cultivation of maize or corn, beans, and squash. Gradually, the Mayans developed more advanced farming techniques, like irrigation and terracing systems. However, they weren't the only civilizations in the area at the time. In fact, the Mayans lived side by side with the Olmecs, widely regarded as the first mother culture of the region of present-day Mexico. Most archaeologists and historians believe the Olmecs significantly influenced Mayan society. However, more recent findings have raised questions about whether the Olmecs actually came first or if the two civilizations developed simultaneously. Doctors Takeshi Inomata and Daniela Triadin, a husband and wife anthropologist team that we can only assume led an Indiana Jones-like existence, spent years excavating the ruins of the ancient Mayan city of Ceibal. Originally, Ceibal was thought to have been almost wholly influenced and inspired by the Olmec city of La Venta. However, when doctors Inomata and Triadin used radiocarbon dating on the oldest structures they discovered at Ceibal, they discovered that they predated most ancient construction found in La Venta by 200 years. Thus, it seems that the Olmecs were not the Mayans' mother civilization, but rather developed around the same time. Many archaeologists now believe that the definite distinctions between Olmecs and Mayans are erroneous to begin with, and it's likely that many such Mesoamerican mini-civilizations started developing concurrently after the start of maize agriculture, borrowing from and influencing each other, eventually likely blending into one big society. This belief is strengthened by the fact that mentions of the Olmecs gradually vanish from writings over time, and the Olmecs as a group seem to disappear almost completely by 400 BC. However, the Mayan civilization continued to advance and grow at an impressive pace. Over the next centuries, the original Mayan villages kept growing and expanding until they became full-fledged cities. Unlike the first communities of basic houses and farms, these cities had large religious centers, temples, palaces, athletic fields, and public gathering places. The Mayans also engaged in extensive metalworking with gold and copper, and developed a complex hieroglyphic writing system that was only fully deciphered in the last century. Archaeologists estimate that the system of writing was created between 200 and 300 BC, which is earlier than initially thought. This shows that we're still learning about the Mayan civilization, and much of its history, culture, and daily life is still shrouded in mystery today. What we've gleaned comes from inscriptions, archaeological finds, and their only 4 surviving codices, as well as books written on paper made from wild fig trees held together by jaguar skin covers, because even Mayan books were badass. By the way, there are only 4 codices in existence because the Spanish destroyed most of the books when they found them upon arrival, decrying them as pagan. However, unlike most ancient Western Hemisphere civilizations, the Mayans were not brought down by the Spanish. The golden age of Mayan civilization was between 250 AD and 900 AD. If you were paying any attention during your high school history class, you might notice that 900 AD was long before the Spanish and English started colonizing the, quote, New World. Understanding what may have led to the collapse of the Mayan civilization means understanding the Mayans themselves. During the peak of their civilization, the Mayans made astounding advances in astronomy, architecture, and their calendar systems. In fact, the Mayans had one of the most complicated calendar systems in the world, based partly on their very accurate understanding of astronomy. They had two simultaneous calendars, one divided into 18 months of 20 days, and another, known as the Long Count calendar, divided into units called Baktun. The latter told us the world was supposed to end in 2012. Perhaps not shockingly, the calendar itself never actually said that, but a whole bunch of people for whom the apocalypse can't come soon enough interpreted it that way. What the Long Count calendar does say is that the full cycle of creation consisted of 13 Baktun, and the very last one of those would end on December 21st, 2012. However, this doesn't necessarily mean the collapse of the world as we know it. First of all, it's past 2012. The world's still here, though admittedly, it's not in the best state. Second of all, the Mayans had even longer units of measurement that counted millions of years and extended past the 2012 date. In addition to their surprisingly accurate contributions to calendar systems, they built glorious pyramids, some of which remain at sites like Chichen Itza, Tikal, Palenque, and Tulum, if you can even get to the latter through the throngs of Instagram influencers on the local beaches. Some of these pyramids were actually related to the Mayans' astronomical research. At the top of the pyramid at Chichen Itza, for example, there is a dome-shaped structure known as El Caracol that almost looks like a modern observatory. Though to our knowledge no telescope was housed there, the dome seems to have been perfectly aligned with the movements of Venus. It also provided a way for astronomers and religious figures of the day to get clear views of the sky, perched high above the canopy of the thick jungles of Central America. Part of the reasons the Mayans were so intent on accurately cataloging the movements of planets and stars is that they believed the movements of celestial bodies were intricately connected to the desires and the actions of the gods. As noted before, when discussing the calendar system, the Mayans believed that life and time were a series of cycles. In fact, according to the Popol Vuh, a book that tells a lot of their mythology, the creation of man was also the result of a few cycles. Initially, humans were constructed out of mud and earth. As you can imagine from this structurally unsound combination, they quickly crumbled. The second cohort was built out of wood, but this too proved to be unsuitable, and they were washed away, presumably in one of the region's frequent tropical storms. So what ingredients finally did the trick and created the modern-day humans? Well, according to their mythology, the humans that finally became the Mayans were made out of maize, which should give you an idea of just how important that crop was to Mayan society. The Mayans valued many goods very differently from what we would expect in the modern day. For example, the gold of the area, something the Spanish would literally kill for centuries later, was only important for jewelry and religious items. Besides that, gold had no real monetary value in the Mayan world. They didn't even use coins. Instead, they preferred to trade and barter various goods with neighboring groups of people. Even when it came to precious metals and gemstones, jade was valued much more than gold. However, gold was used in religious rituals, which sometimes involved, yeah, you guessed it, human sacrifice. In the Mayan world, there was a kind of heaven with 13 different layers and an underworld known as Xibalba, with 9 different layers, each ruled by a death lord that the souls of the dead had to pass through before ascending to heaven. It sounded, quite frankly, like a horrible journey. Maybe that's why the beliefs of the time allowed for a shortcut to getting not only into heaven, but supreme heaven, i.e. the top layer. This was reserved for those killed in sacrifice, either for religious reasons or at the ball court. We'll get to that later. And women who died in childbirth. Thus, the benefit of becoming a sacrifice seemed to be that you got to teleport straight to winning against the equivalent of the Afterworld's final video game boss. The drawback was that you would be painted blue, have a headdress put on you, have 4 men hold you down to represent the cardinal directions while your heart was removed, and then be decapitated, often after being extensively tortured. This would usually happen at the summit of a temple for maximum visibility, both to other Mayans and to the gods, for whom the sacrifice was the gift, a great blood offering. Other animals were sacrificed as well, but the blood of humans was considered the ultimate honor. Some of the events that merited human sacrifice included the dedication of a new temple or the rise of a new ruler. Others involved losing an apparently very high-stakes ball game. Athletic fields have been discovered in Mayan cities in the shape of a capital I. At least one in Chichen Itza is bigger than the length of a modern football field. The game was not just for fun and sport. Like many things in Mayan culture, it was intricately connected to Mayan spiritual beliefs. It's supposedly based on a game that two of the most important Mayan spiritual figures, brothers by the name of Hunhunakpu and Xabalanque, played while they were still on Earth, and it signifies the battle between the forces of light and darkness. Only the right hip, right elbow, and right knee were allowed to make contact with the ball, and the ball itself, weighing approximately 6 to 9 pounds or 3 to 4 kilograms, could never touch the floor. The two teams would consist of 2 to 6 players each, and the goal was for the offensive team to get the ball back to the defensive team, preferably through a tiny, and we mean tiny, stone ring in the middle of the court, at the top of the border wall, while the defense's goal was to make the offensive team drop the ball. We're not sports specialists, but one team's job seems significantly easier than the other. You might be wondering where human sacrifice comes into all this. Well, quite a few historians believe that the losing team may have been ritually killed in those games, or in their place, a captured lord or king. Others believe this aspect of the ball game was exaggerated, and perhaps a captive or two may have been killed at the end of the game, but they were people who would have likely been sacrificed anyway. Either way, it is clear that the ball game held a very important religious significance for Mayan society, and courts for those games have been found throughout the former reaches of the Mayan civilization. This relatively unified mythology may give the impression that the Mayans functioned as one strong empire. However, the reality was that the civilization was split into units, akin to the Greek city-states that would sometimes fight for control. Each city of the Mayan Empire had a local ruler known as an ahau, though some cities bucked the trend of autocracy. Seren, for example, was a village located in present-day El Salvador and buried around 600 AD in a volcanic eruption. Archaeologists working in the area found no evidence of an elite ruling class, and instead believed the village was set up communally. In other words, the hippies of the Mayan world. That being said, godlike rulers seemed to be the norm throughout the region, and some of them, like Pacal of Palenque, were buried inside their very own dedicated pyramids. Pacal was entombed with precious items like jade, funerary masks, and, of course, the bodies of 5 or 6 human sacrifices alongside it. Apparently, the phrase, "everyone dies alone," did not apply to Mayan rulers. One of the most well-known and powerful Mayan cities at the time, centuries before it became known as the home of Señor Frogs and American college students disappointing their parents, was Cancun. Various archaeological finds have confirmed that Cancun's status as a wealthy Mayan city extended up to 800 AD, though little remains from the society after that date. One of the last intricately carved panels depicting the ruler of Cancun has been dated to 795 AD. This is where we can start investigating how the Mayan civilization collapsed, as Cancun gives us one possible reason. Archaeologists have determined that around the year of Cancun's seeming collapse, the city was attacked. Evidence of mass violence has been found, including 38 separate bodies showing signs of violent, brutal trauma that died around that year. Whoever attacked Cancun massacred the royal family and buried them, along with their jewelry. Could the Mayan Empire have collapsed as a result of attacks? And who were the attackers? Well, some cities may have met their fate that way, but there's more to this story than meets the eye. You see, there are signs that the power of the Mayans was waning way before their empire mysteriously disappeared. The collapse itself didn't happen overnight, and the civilization likely fell over a period of 100 years, with various areas affected at different times. However, in some locations, it truly does seem like the local inhabitants just got up and left one day. For example, in the ancient city of Bonampak, one of the buildings has gorgeous murals adorning its walls. Though the murals start with the local ahau winning a glorious battle around the year 791, at some point the artwork just stops. There are half-finished sketches on one relatively blank part of the mural still visible today, indicating that the artists were still working on it and planning to complete it, but instead they just left. Aguateca, located in Guatemala, has a similar eerie building within its borders. Builders and artists were constructing a temple, but at some point it became obvious they were either called away, left, or slaughtered in the middle of their work. Part of the temple stela had been smoothed, indicating they were about to be covered with the usual detailed carvings found in Mayan temples. But these carvings never materialized. Strangely enough, archaeologists also found evidence that in the years before the temple was mysteriously abandoned, the people of Aguateca had built additional defensive structures, like palisades and other fortifications. Could it be that they were threatened? Had an invader leveled neighboring cities and put them on edge? This phenomenon was observed throughout the area the Mayan civilization covered, not just in a few select cities. The collapse seemed to start around Patesh Batun and then continued across the Usumacinta River. Scribes stopped recording history, artists stopped making sculptures, and buildings and artwork were left half-finished. The strange thing is that the Mayans themselves didn't disappear. Their descendants still live in Mexico and Central America to this day, speaking Mayan languages, most often in addition to the Spanish later imposed on them by colonizers. An estimated 7 million people identify as Mayans living throughout Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, parts of Honduras, and of course the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, as well as other parts of the country. In fact, there are approximately 750,000 to 1.2 million Mayan speakers in the Yucatan alone. The number of people with Mayan surnames and ancestry is 3 times as high, though many may not speak Mayan anymore, especially as a first language. Mexico's National Institute of Geography and Informatics estimates that 60% of the Yucatan state's population speaks Mayan. Additionally, approximately 42% of Guatemala's population is of Mayan descent, and unfortunately, they tend to experience a fair amount of discrimination from the state. So if the actual people are still here, what in the world happened to their civilization and cities? How did it all disappear? Clearly, they weren't completely ethnically cleansed or wiped out by disease, though the Spanish did later introduce the remaining Mayans to smallpox, which decimated a fair number of them, or any of the other horrible fates that can and have befallen indigenous populations. Well, here are some theories about the demise of the mighty Mayan Empire and why some cities seem to show evidence of brutal attacks. First, historians believe overpopulation may have contributed to the collapse of Mayan cities. The biggest Mayan city at the time, Tikal, reached a population of approximately 50,000 inhabitants at the beginning of the 9th century. This may seem like nothing compared to the billions upon billions of people currently crowding our planet. After all, to use a regional point of comparison, Guatemala City currently has a population of just under 1 million people. However, with resources and agricultural practices available to them, 50,000 people concentrated in one city would have put a huge strain on resources. The Mayans likely would have struggled to produce enough food to feed everyone in their population, leading to discontent, famine, and people seeking food to sustain themselves elsewhere, most likely in the countryside. Another theory about the disappearance of the Mayan civilization lends even more credence to this one. It explains why the fall of the Mayan cities happened relatively quickly in some areas. Researchers have found evidence of a massive and widespread drought in the lowlands around the Mayan cities at the beginning of the 9th century, which, if you recall, is the same time that the Mayan population reached its peak. Cambridge University researcher Nicholas Evans and his team analyzed sediment cores from Lake Chichon Canab in the Yucatan Peninsula, located within the lands of the Mayan civilization. They gave some great insights into the climate during the classical period of the Mayans. By examining oxygen and hydrogen isotopes in the sediments, Evans and his team found that the Mayans not only experienced a prolonged drought during the time of their collapse, but also intermittent prolonged droughts over a period of 400 years. Soil analysis shows that annual rainfall decreased by 41 to 54% for long periods during the 400-year time span. This is significant because it also shows why the Mayans may have struggled to build up food reserves to buffer themselves against prolonged periods of drought if they'd already faced several periods of low water supply. Unfortunately, the drought was likely partly caused by the Mayans' own practices, especially the final one that led to civilization's collapse. Mayan farmers practiced slash and burn agriculture, meaning that in order to grow the quantities of maize they needed to support an expanding population, they had to tear down a significant amount of surrounding forest. Trees were also used as fuel and construction materials. This deforestation likely caused a form of climate change in the immediate vicinity, with rising temperatures due to the lack of trees available to absorb atmospheric gases and much lower rainfall in the area. A drought like this would have exacerbated any existing food insecurity in the region and led to a lack of work for farmers, a lack of food for citizens, and generalized discontent. In turn, this could have easily contributed to not only Mayan subjects fleeing in search of food, but perhaps rebelling against their rulers for failing to secure better living conditions. This is where Mayan beliefs and culture also come into play. After all, the Ahaus and the ruling class were often connected to divinity and partly in charge of keeping the gods pleased in order to provide a good life for the people under their command. If the Mayans saw their food sources dwindling and nothing happening to stop it, they may have concluded that their local Ahaus were not doing their jobs or had displeased the gods in some way. This also raises the possibility that the hastily abandoned Mayan cities may not have all been attacked by outsiders. Some may have been deserted as the result of rebellions from their own populations, which would remove the need for commemorative artwork in temples for the area's rulers, as they would have probably been among the first killed. However, the existence of additional defensive fortifications in some Mayan cities also points to some threat of outside interference. According to some historians, this could be evidence of attacks or the threat of attacks from other Mayan cities, not necessarily an entirely foreign force. The drought and food shortages could have caused increased infighting, with the state of warfare causing the availability of supplies to dwindle even further. Historians have discovered texts from the 9th century that mention conflicts between cities more frequently than usual. Archaeologists have unearthed panels depicting captured enemies and listing the names of the rulers defeated in battle. While various Mayan cities were at war with each other, the movement of troops and various skirmishes would have likely blocked trade routes, not to mention the ability of cities to trade with each other if they were at war. For the Mayan economy, which was heavily based on barter and trade, this would have been especially devastating, drastically decreasing the number of supplies that people could obtain to help their society function. In turn, this would likely spur some rulers to attack more neighboring cities in search of additional supplies for their own population. Thus, it's likely that a population peak, coupled with drought and food shortages, exacerbated by warfare, worked together to quickly destroy the mighty Mayan cities. However, these are not the only theories on the table. These theories are somewhat weakened by the idea that certain Mayan cities, Chichen Itza and Uxmal for example, continued to flourish for about 150 years after their sister cities had fallen. Then these cities of the north of the Yucatan Peninsula mysteriously collapsed relatively quickly. So what caused two collapses to occur about a century and a half apart? Well, into the 10th century, reliefs and inscriptions on the walls of the palace and other buildings of Uxmal show scenes of warfare and human sacrifice. Someone was around to carve them and fight in the wars, so it seems that Uxmal, though at war, was still present. In fact, the impressive governor's palace in Uxmal, which remains in the area today, was built in the 10th century. This leads historians to believe that Uxmal was not only surviving at the time, but thriving. In the 11th century, the same fate started to befall Uxmal and many surrounding cities of the former northern part of the Mayan Empire. New constructions and monuments were left half-finished, and the entire area around Uxmal, known as Puuc, was completely depopulated. This occurred around the same time as Chichen Itza continued to expand, but it too was eventually abandoned. No one really has a good idea as to why that happened. Perhaps the northern cities experienced less severe drought. Perhaps with the depopulated southern cities, they could source more supplies for their people and sustain themselves for a few decades. Perhaps, as some voices on the internet suggest, the Mayans were visited by aliens who ended their civilization and then they made a return trip. It seems likely that in the long term, the Mayans' agricultural and environmental practices were simply unsustainable and not conducive to supporting an ever-expanding population increasingly concentrated in urban centers. Though we still don't know exactly what happened to the Mayans, a combination of man-made drought, overpopulation, warfare, and political instability seem to be the most likely culprits for what brought the once mighty civilization to its knees. The good news is, we never have to worry about things like that leading to the doom of a society ever again. Today, many descendants of the Mayans preserve ancient rituals, customs, modes of dress, farming practices, traditional jewelry making, and even their ancestors' last names. So, in certain ways, Mayan culture continues onwards, long after the civilization itself collapsed. Unfortunately, many indigenous descendants of the Mayans are heavily discriminated against in the countries in which they live, in ways that are often violent. During the 36-year-long Guatemalan Civil War, which ended in 1996, the victims of assault and murder were disproportionately Mayan. Now check out Aztecs versus Spartans. Who would win? Or watch the...
Today, you might have noticed something different about me, and it's not the cool jacket I'm wearing, it's not that I still have hair on my head, it's the chair that I'm sitting in. Take a look! Is it called E-Win? What a name. We have a brand new chair here, all right? And the reason isn't because I've sold out to a different company. The reason is because I am doing the opposite. You know, I get a lot of sponsorship offers on this stream. People giving me money to try to promote a product to sell to you. And I take them a good amount of the time. But even more often, I don't take the sponsors. But what if I went through my email and I purchased every single item?
Gonna watch clips. I haven't watched clips in a long time. I need you guys to catch me up with the happenings. Is that actually a sperm whale's dick? It's so big. It's like taller than humans. How do whales fuck? Is it also insertion? Oh my god, it must be so tiring because like, you know, like they're like, imagine water pressure and having to like, imagine I'm a male whale. So like if I stick my dick inside something and I'm like this in the water, let's just say it's in. If it's in and then I have to go like with the water pressure, like I was just gonna say I just end up soaking. Is it all on the hips even when you're in the water though? Because I could never be a guy, or I could never be a pegger. It's just so tiring. I've like tried so much to see what it's like to be the fucker, and I can't. I've like tried with my pillow, not like inserted into my pillow, but like I've tried the motion, and I can't go fast. Like, you know, sometimes when it goes like pew 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 pew, I would die.
Squeeze, do you have a favorite slur? Wait, Dave, you haven't seen my slur tier list video? My slur tier list. Every single slur is an F slur. Or sorry, no, an F tier. Wait, stop. Oh,
Don't tell me
And Prezzo was in his chat. Prezzo was in his chat. If you don't know, Prezzo is homosexual.
Should just make you see from the men.
No, I'm a woman.
You know what? How do I?
No, I'm a woman.
Because I have a pussy.
Ew! Ew!
What?
Ew!
This is so sweetly. I have a pussy.
Dude.
What?
Ew!
I'm literally saying the fact.
Ew.
That I have a
Jay does have
Ew.
one though.
pussy.
I'm done. I'm gonna go hang with that deer. That deer's much vulgar than you are.
Wait, there's a deer? How else am I supposed to prove it?
How you know? Have I seen her pussy? I might have seen her pussy. Have I seen her pussy? No, I don't think so. No, I'm trying to think of like when we changed, if she was pussy out or if she was wearing her swimsuit underneath. I think she was wearing her swimsuit underneath. So she wasn't pussy out at the ranch? Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I was trying to think if she's definitely seen my pussy. I go naked too much. I'm always late, so like when I would change, I'll just be like, okay, just here. Here's my body.
That's a lot of information to get in 30 seconds.
I would not write in Kanye. That's so. Also, after some of Kanye's recent stuff.
I'm writing a minute before now. Really pulled their weight.
Guys, not a fan. Remember, separate the artist from the politics. Not a fan of his music, but great guy.
Hi, call me Doc. Or not Doc. Sorry. Call me Gordon Freeman. It's fine.
Now, can we not use the R word, please? My sister-in-law is retarded.
Sorry, guys. I need to write that down in my notes. I need to steal that. I have like almost 2 full pages of jokes. Have you used any? I haven't said heterosapien yet, but I need to remember to use that one. I still need to use the Shein one where you look at someone's outfit and you go, "Oh, nice outfit. I'm also a fan of Shein." Are you a bullet? Because I can't get you out of my head. Wait, but I don't understand this one. Because at the end it says like, by JFK. How do I say that in a way that makes it sound like I'm JFK? Boston accent? Wait, sorry. I can't do a Boston accent. Park the car in Harmony. Don't call me Stephen Hawking. Are you a bullet? Because I can't. How do you do a Boston accent? Park the car. That's all I got.
Sorry. Please don't hurt me. Oh my god. Stop.
My neck.
You're out of my head. My neck. Hurt his neck. Peach, his neck.
Oh my god.
Peach, his neck.
You're like, oh my god. Oh no. Please stop.
Your minions really pulled their weight.
Reminds me of last night.
Call me a bitch again.
Oh no. Please stop. Your boobs are in my face. No. Please. I can't breathe.
Upstairs, baby.
Oh no. Don't suffocate me with your massive knockers, Peach. Please. That should be me.
You know, people ask you such personal things. Do you always tell them every?
Is there a sense, though, that Senator Hagel, is there a sense that that it definitely was some Middle East-oriented group that coordinated this attack? That it was.
He didn't realize what it was.
I'm sorry. Arm gesture.
Oh yes, my favorite clip. Oh my god, one of my favorite clips.
Okay. Arm gesture, accompanied by saying its name, rapidly grew to be considered one of the cringiest trends of all time. City Anna buzzed in first.
What is the whip?
You can win this thing.
That is incorrect. It is not the whip. Would anyone else like to venture a guess? Scara!
What is Hail Hitler?
I think that's a lot. This clip is so good. He's laughing, but he's doing the type of laugh where he's only laughing because everyone else is laughing and he has no idea why they're laughing. And he just wants to like be part of it. So he's like smiling while confused.
Welcome back. How's it going?
Look at it.
I think that's a lot more than cringe. I don't think so. But
Crazy. All right. Should we make a new lobby so there's more brown people?
Yeah.
You love saying. Chat, if you're just watching, we're doing the whites against the browns. Versus the Squeaks viewers.
Take your hand and make it into the closest approximation of a cylinder that you can. So wrap your
Wait, hold on.
first, juggle your balls a little bit until your penis becomes turgid. At that point, take your hand and make it into the closest approximation of a cylinder that you can. So wrap your fingers around your penis. Engage in rhythmic stroking until you feel a feeling you've never felt before.
I feel a
Go.
feeling I've never felt before. I'm stealing the word target too. Didn't he say
Now
hands?
swallow it. And you're done.
Yippee! Chinese citizen tries to access a legal website.
To the left, I can visit porn website without a VPN. After a few minutes, I tried.
You're doing
The
great
police
out there.
called me. Like literally, the police were calling me.
See, me personally, I simply wouldn't do that. Because I actually respect the Chinese government. Chinese people piss me off. And I know that they know what's best for me, and I wouldn't even try. Because, like, if I can't access something, it means it's bad for me. Some of the shit I watch, like, I don't feel comfortable watching unless I'm using ExpressVPN. Shame on you, CC. Shame on you.
After all this conversation
我的名字是 Long Veteran，我今天在New York City。
New York. Just to let you know, New York in Chinese is 纽约. Not New York City.
看一看。I said today I'm in New York City looking around.
Anyways, my favorite one is Still I Think About
just
You.
happened?
Such a good song.
What just happened?
Oh, I can't
Guys.
so much love without you.
Oh.
Guys. No, but the
Oh. They just have such a beautiful brotherly and sisterly love. There's nothing wrong about that. I don't know why Nick has to make things so uncomfortable for everyone around him. I think it's beautiful.
What is my favorite food around the world that I wish to taste? Your mom.
Like, have you ever asked yourself what your face looks like if you're not trying, if you're not being perceived? Like, if there's, you ever asked
Wish to taste? Your mom.
Like, have you ever asked yourself what your face looks like if you're not trying, if you're not being perceived? Like, if there's no, if you're alone in an
You're not
elevator,
being oh.
like no muscles being used, what do you look like?
Oh, I hate
That's
that.
the question.
Oh, I hate. No, I have thought about this. I kept getting filmed while I was default facing. I came to realize my default face, I look super lost. Like, I look confused and I look lost. I hate my lost expression.
Don't laugh at me or make fun of me. This is my default face. No muscles being used. Okay, ready? Watch this. Watch this.
Wait, why does it kind of look like Mario? His face reminds me of
That's what I
Mario.
look like. I know. It's f***ed up. It's so f***ed up. So like that's why I'm working on like my default look. So like
Yes, I have
wanna
been
be like
too.
this is like the default face I think I look like. Ready? Take the hair off. Don't performance enhance me. Don't performance enhance me.
I can bring in more power from
Me sticking my meat inside the moldy slime-covered shower drain that feels like a cold pussy of... Why you put a watermark? No one's stealing it, bro!
At radioactive cum jar. I don't know.
No one is stealing this! You do not need to put a watermark on it! That is insane! No one is... Trust me, no one is stealing that, man.
You guys look at who Squeaks thinks are the best players. No. Nah, that's telling. That is telling.
Squeak. You got
Wait a second.
She's for pig.
He's not an ally.
I am an ally.
I am an ally. He picked all men.
The weaker players because
Wait.
I picked the because I think
Now he's insulting his.
no, I'm not.
So, okay.
Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and get
And you wouldn't play with
Slow down right now.
Hey, you would have played the woman there week 2? Is that what you're saying? Oh, that's different.
Wait, but I'm Indian. So does that help? Would that
I'm a minority.
What? I'm just saying.
Okay, are we ready? It's just gonna begin. We're just gonna go ahead and spin it. Let's go. All right. Here we go. And spin and begin. Okay, team number one. Team one. Team one. Team one. Team one. Team one. Team one. Team. Ella.
Is it perfect? Okay.
Ella.
Get it out of the way early.
Oh my God, it's gonna be foolish.
Oh god, it was so close! It was so close!
Really excited to team up.
You know the worst thing is I'm watching Leslie's stream and everyone was screaming. I was like, I don't know what's going on there. Sorry, I got a forward.
Okay. Okay, Celine, pause.
I just have this feeling it's gonna be me. I'm gonna be on Celine's team. I have this feeling. I felt it since yesterday. Oh my God, Celine! Celine did I DM'd you about it. No, I just had I DM'd Celine about it.
Actually rigged.
We are so screwed for Lethal Company.
Peter.
Oh, Peter, it's Peter.
Peter, who do you want? Peter, who do you want?
Janet, obviously. Let's go!
And we have the teams. Alright, Timmy, Sean, team 4. That Laurent opening.
Alright, Ellum, let's bounce.
Alright, Celine, let's bounce.
See you on the flip side.
Oh God, Celine, I'm sorry. The Valorant portion's not gonna go well.
No. I don't even care about this portion. I'm just personally gonna try to kill Foolish as much as I can.
Yes, please. Okay, so we just blast B.
Yeah, let's just blast B. Okay. I'm smoking. Where'd you go? No! Denver's such a smart molly! No!
Oh hell! Go cat, go cat.
Yeah, you can walk up cat.
Okay, I'm going.
Yeah, you go. Care, one might already be in heaven. One is. They're not. Yeah, they're not going to me.
Player standing.
He's behind me. Tree.
Man.
What in the hell? Foolish is like everywhere.
Dude, what is with this guy?
One enemy remaining.
Freaking Foolish just plays too well!
I hate him.
What? He's gotta stop using his util, man!
I'm gonna teabag you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna teabag you.
give it to me. Yeah. Okay.
Man, they're playing too smart.
I just click heads. I go. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll do Vandal here.
One enemy remaining.
Nice! Let's go!
Last round before the switch.
Well played.
Joke's over! You're dead!
Last player
No
standing.
way, dude! Where was he? Go peek that. He's heaven. He's ulted. Oh, 2 dropped. Oh, you can't get spiked from there. I planted tuck.
One enemy remaining.
Go! Oh,
Did we get spiked up? No, he halved it, didn't he?
yeah, he probably halved it. Oh, he did it. Oh my God! Leslie! I didn't have a new place. Oh my God, Leslie!
Switching sides.
That was good. We did it. We're doing it.
Dude, I did 142. I did 140. I should just wait for the blind to go out.
Oops, I leaked my location.
Damn it! My bad! They smoked the door. They mollied off the door. I'm gonna put a random smoke on site.
retaking B, I ain't gonna lie.
One's on site.
Last player standing.
B main. Phoenix is B main. Oh, NT.
I should have
Dude, Jeffrey's too fast. This kid is too fast.
Do it, Leslie. Do it.
Woo!
B?
Oh,
Wait,
Omen
that
was
was
B.
A.
Phoenix is A. They just split up.
Stealing sight.
I hate everything about this. Just kill me.
Honestly,
That's illegal.
it is illegal. Okay, it's fine. That was good. That was good. That was super fun.
I blinded her.
Darn you! Screw
Oh my
you!
goodness.
Screw you guys! I mean, GG's.
Yeah, nice try.
We had you
Alan was a
sweating.
playmaker.
Oh, so quiet. Oh, they're planning B. They're planning B.
Oh my sickos.
Spike planted.
Oh my god, did they just walk in?
Last player standing.
Stairs, bottom. Oh my god, you. Run! That's crazy. That's crazy.
Nice, Sean.
Excellent work.
You're so good. Let's go.
Okay, now they know. Now they know I play aggressive though. Okay, so I can't do that again.
We survive.
We win. We survive.
What's your
Last
strategy?
player
Oh, I
standing.
whipped 110 on Sean. They're both mid.
Mid go in A. Oh god.
Oh, B. Sean's one tap. Both. One drop. Both dropped. One's planning.
Spike planted.
No one's on it. It's okay, Leslie. It's okay. Nobody's on it.
Cutting baby. Stealing sight.
Oh, they're holding a crossfire. So one's tucked to your left here
So evil.
or below, and then one's and then I think Sean's backside.
I don't like
Don't
this.
tell the others.
You got this. You got this.
Okay, here we go.
Shut up, boy. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. I don't want to hear it from anybody.
I should have told you
I'm
that
not
left
peanut
first
gallery.
because
Oh, yeah,
Sean
sorry,
is probably trying to peek off of Kimmy's contact. I should have said that. I should.
I can't blame Fizz. It was a bit of 50-50 kind of.
Do I have permission to
it
turn
is.
Leslie's I don't like this into a sound alert?
I hate you. Marble, you have to move. I can't play if you're sitting there.
Last player standing.
Oh, they just helped for the push.
That's insane.
Spike planted. Stealing sight. One enemy remaining.
Oh my god, Leslie! That was so good!
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
16, 16 CSGO legend.
Okay.
Have a good battle, friend.
I'm so bad. Holy fuck. I'm so bad, and I read that perfectly.
You read that. You read them like a freaking book.
Last player
I hate
standing.
everything. You got off. Yeah. Cringe.
Coming back.
The battle is really raging
Dude,
out
I
there.
should.
Marble, no. Marble, please. Marble, my mouse. Man, I should have blinded. I just thought I was
You
being
should
sneaky.
run. And then
One enemy remaining.
oh my god.
Marble, I need my mouse. Marble, please.
Oh no. Oh no.
Oh, TNT.
Marvel's on the
Marble
other
it
team, guys.
Marbles
Dude,
it up.
Marble
Marbles
is
it up.
throwing.
Other team.
I know.
Actually, I don't even need a blind here. JK. Oh, actually, no blind.
That dart saw both of us.
Sauce.
Cutting their vision. One enemy remaining.
You owned him.
Got him. Comes.
Have a good battle,
Okay, sight's
friend.
clear.
Last player
Oh, 105.
standing.
Big dinky. He didn't dart A.
I saw ramps.
Stealing sight.
Any defeat that doesn't destroy you
They're roping
makes
up.
you stronger.
Okay, they know. Okay, I'm planning. Okay, my alarm bot's off.
One enemy remaining. Flawless.
Oh, we did it! I have no idea what I was doing. I have no idea what I was doing. Thank God we did it. Thank God, dude. That was so awkward for me. Honestly, they might play
Stealing
aggressive.
sight.
Vinci.
Sentry.
Vinci.
Oh, I forgot to buy up. Oops.
Oh, it's okay. We don't need it.
I think one's deep in sight. Don't go sight.
My ult's ready.
Let me contact first, Leslie.
Last player
Never mind,
standing.
she's heaven.
Spike down A. One enemy remaining.
Nice, you could go B. Sean's on site.
Have this spike.
I'm dipping.
You are not out of this
I
yet.
hate this stupid card. It got in my head. Oh, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Oh, Sean.
Too easy. Too easy. You get one, I get one.
Sentry.
One enemy remaining.
Oh, he got my turn. He's be heaven. Care.
Cutting their vision.
I'm gonna go run stairs to
He
heaven.
dropped.
Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. This way.
Enemy spotted B.
Watch out.
Alarm bot out.
Last player
No,
standing.
I expected it too.
Bad, bad, no, no, no.
Sudden death.
Fuck, I thought I could hold it.
Nah, dude, that was a good. That was a. You could. Oh my gosh.
I should have
So
to.
close.
I was actually like 1 second off.
Last player standing.
He's a genius.
Coming back.
He's a genius. I froze when he saw me. I should have blinded.
I didn't blind. It's okay. Fourth Valo. I manifested that.
What a
Anti-air
timing of his
everything.
swing. What is that swing
What a
timing?
game,
That's,
though.
oh my god, it was
What a
close.
game, guys. What a damn game.
Timing was so crazy.
Oh, GG.
Okay, this one you have to hold on every like minute or so. The wind sucks you to the middle, and you have to hang on to heavy things. Yeah. All right, this is the one that counts. Good luck, everybody. Okay, okay. Sean, chill, Sean, chill, Sean. You are gonna regret that. You're gonna regret that. Okay, chill. Truce. No, you're not. Ellum, if I die right here because of you, I'm gonna be actually mad at you in real life. I'm mad at you. I'm mad at you officially. I'm actually mad at you.
They can't get away with this.
I don't know how to live. I don't know how to live.
Ellum, it's your fault. Everything is your fault.
And fish incoming. Oh no. Okay, guys, we have to target Janet and Peter. We have to get them. We're all a team now. Okay, I regret it, Peter. Truce. That's actually messed up. That's so mean. That's just mean. I'm trying. I'm missing everything. Okay, please help. Ellen, help. Get him.
Now get him. Oh,
why did that happen?
Get him.
Get him, Leslie.
I'm trying. Please help, please. Okay, everyone. No, you're not though. That's crazy. We can work together right here. Everyone just hold on. Just hold on. If you're dead, target Janet and Peter. If you're dead.
Janitor's still in.
Ella.
Wake up, Samurai!
Damn it, Peter's still alive.
Run, Celine, run.
We have to
How is he still there?
Yeah.
Fish
Oh
attack.
no.
Kimmy, as long as you stay alive, Kimmy, as long as you stay alive there.
That's good. Oh, that's good. No! Just stay alive the longest!
I'm trying. I don't win this. I'm on the bottom. I don't win this. Celine wins this.
No, wait, I think...
Celine
psycho. Everyone's literally psycho.
Don't know how to pick up. I'm worthless. I'm worthless in this game.
I almost got her! I almost got her! No!
You want some of this?
Now I'm upset.
Oh shit, she's pissed, she's pissed. I don't think we're holding on. I don't think we're holding on.
I was relying so much.
Oh, Peter's still alive.
I'm gonna knock him out. I got the golden fish coming. I got the.
Oh my god.
Way to go. Way to go, Ella.
This is good. Truce. My glass. Oh, wait. Oh, those are your glasses, Foolish. Here, I'll help you.
Wait, no, stop it.
Gotta go.
Here, Foolish. Don't worry about it. Here, let me end your pain for you. Here.
No, stop.
Come here.
Not the head. Got me, you freak. Come on, give me the chain.
No!
I think I got it. Wait,
No! I did not let go.
Oh no.
I did not let go.
Oh no.
Peter survives it.
No.
That was bullshit. It might be. I didn't let go.
He won.
No. Okay.
Fucking
this is not our game. God, this
wow.
was really not our game.
let's fucking
Happy. Okay, winners to the front.
Winners to the front.
Winners to the front.
Winners to the front.
Winners to the front. Fight party.
White party. Okay.
Okay, first to 6. Good luck, everybody.
I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you, Leslie.
Oh my god, I love you. There's no way. There's just no way.
Who did I just fuck up?
Okay, that's just messed up. That's crazy.
Can you two attack each other?
Oh my god.
Jesus Christ! I have no weapon. I'm pathetic. Why are you chasing me? Why are you chasing me?
Get away! Get to the other side! You need to get further away from the blizzard!
Run!
Peter won. I'm dead.
I'm dead.